the thing is struggling. We're not sure what to do with it. I asked you to take over.
Yeah.
Right? We had decided to move to Cleveland. We had hired a management company. We fired them. I said, I need you to do this.
Yeah.
They lasted about 6 months,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
I just didn't have that entrepreneurial mindset that we were looking
No, they were like association management.
Yeah.
Man, you never viewed EPI as an association.
Right,
It was
exactly.
like a community.
Right. And I remember saying to you, I don't know if you remember this or not, I remember saying to you, I need you to do this.
Yeah.
I don't have time to do it. The family's invested money in this thing.
Right.
There's nobody else that I trust. I need you to do
Game
it.
time. Right.
And I want you to commit to do it for 2 years. And after 2 years, if you don't want to do it anymore, we'll come up with another solution.
Sure.
But I need you to commit to do this for 2 years.
Yeah.
And you said yes.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider. We are back. I think this is the third time I've had Dad on the show, or maybe fourth. We've danced around all kinds of different topics, shared a bunch of different stories, but this episode is another Flip the Script episode. I believe it's our last one of the year, and I thought what a great time to kind of start beginning to wrap up the season 2 of the Exit Now podcast with the last Flip the Script episode being with my dad and the creator of the methodology, as you all know, and the CEO here at EPI. So as you've seen it throughout the year, it is your show, Dad. So be careful with it. It's only in season 2.
Hey, you're in trouble.
but have at it. It's your show. I'll help us kind of maybe through some breaks, but have at it. It's your show. Welcome back. Welcome back. Yeah.
It's been a while since I've been here.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we've kind of
feels like it's been a while.
Yeah, I think we've talked about kind of like the 3 legs of the stool, if you will, and then a little bit of the history of EPI.
Yeah.
Even a couple times this season, a couple times last season, but yeah, so like in the hot seat now. So it'll be interesting to flip the script.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. So what a lot of people, if they've heard me speak, they hear me talk about being an owner is a personal journey more than anything else. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
Right? There's no difference between business and personal, You can't separate it. It's one thing. It's just another aspect of who you are. So I thought what might be interesting to do today is take people on your personal journey as a entrepreneur and the son in the family business equation.
Yep.
Right? And kind of talk through, that history and do a little reminiscing on where we've come from, where we are, and that sort of thing. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
All right. Well, we have to go all the way back to 2003, 21 years ago.
Yep.
And 21 years ago, you started your first business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
M&S Connection Landscaping.
Right.
Yep.
You were only 17 at the time. And I remember you coming to the house at one point with Mikey, who was your partner.
Yeah, the M and M&S.
Mike
right?
and Scott.
Yep.
And asking me if you could use our car and load a lawnmower in it. And I promptly said no.
I think you ended up saying no on the car, but you said yes on the mower.
No, I said no on the mower, too.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the next thing I know is you and Mikey were showing up in Mike's dad's
got
car
a Ford Taurus
with
sedan.
his mower. Anyway, I thought that was pretty cool, actually, that at such a young age, I could tell you were already – actually, I probably could tell you were an entrepreneur when you were like 5 or 6 years old, but maybe that's another story. But first business, you started up and you did pretty well. Maybe you can share some of those stories. But what really sort of I think was a pivotal moment is you ran that business for 5 years. I was your coach at the time and your banker.
Yeah.
And you did pretty well with that business.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people might not know is that by the age of 22, you had started and exited
Yeah.
a business by the age of 22.
Yeah.
5 years into that M&S deal, I came to you and I said, I really want you to sell M&S Connection and join my consulting firm.
Yeah.
And I had my reasons for doing that, which we may have discussed before. But it was really my idea, and I was really driving it. I don't think you were too in tune or really didn't want to do that. And I remember you eventually said yes, but I remember you had a real hard time with it. So what was that? Can you share with everybody, like, what was that feeling like for you, and why were you having a hard time with it? What were you feeling, right? What was the personal side of that decision?
So I think maybe two things. One, that maybe people have heard me tell, if they heard me talk, like when I get introduced, I typically share not necessarily my formal bio and background, but I kind of talk about that first exit planning experience. And I didn't necessarily know what it was, but after I had joined Aspire Management, you kind of fell into and were falling deeper into what back then was called the Biggs model, right?
Right.
And hearing what you had to say about these three-legged stools. So the first thing that comes to mind, twofold. Number one, there was an identity crisis. Is that, I had the sign is here in the studio, right? Is that,
M&S Connection right there.
My name was on the trucks in part, right? It doesn't say Snider, it doesn't say Scott, but I know that initial is mine. And so I think it's even deeper when you see your own name on something. And then I think there's also a little identity crisis because you don't really know who you are, right? So at a super young age, right, I was cutting your grass and doing yard work with you when I was probably 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And then I said, cool, I like doing this work, right? I like being outside. I like working with my hands. Let's make it a job. And then that got serious enough that I said, okay, well, why don't we go to school for it? And I'll go to the Agricultural Technical Institute at Ohio State in Worcester, Ohio, and begin to learn more about landscape construction. And so in that short, 5 or 6 year span, you kind of, I've just identified myself as Scott the landscaper. And, I wasn't really, and you're still young, right? So you're not necessarily thinking like way, at least from a personal standpoint, like way, who am I going to be when I'm 42, when I'm 62 and 72? I was enjoying the time, right? And by that time, when we hit exit, I was kind of splitting my time. I was able to spend some time in the office doing the things I love there, strategy, relationships, and sales.
Yeah.
But then would also get out with the guys and plant the trees and build the paver patios and mow the lawns. And I think you even got out there one time and was snow blowing the snow. I mean, which maybe leads me into my next kind of lesson at that time in my uncertainty is that, as my dad, that I'm like super competitive. And I felt in that time frame too, if I'm being honest, that we weren't really hitting the marks that I wanted to. Remember, really at the end there before we sold, we took on a ton of business. That's why I had you out there snowblowing. If you could imagine the audience thinking of my dad out there with a snowblower and a big apartment.
Sales calls with you too, I think.
But the sales thing I think fits for you, right? But it's like now Dad's out there in the middle of the night snowblowing apartment sidewalks, right? It's just like. And he was there because he's my dad, right? I don't, and he was my mentor and coach, and the bank, right? So it's like we didn't get this done. He wasn't getting paid back anyway, so he better get out there. But I just think that we took on so much work that it was like overwhelming, and we lost a couple of clients during that time, not because of maybe lack of quality, but because we were so busy we didn't spend enough time at each one of the properties. And I think that was like recession time too. I remember. It was. Like we took a big hit because we used to be
like 07, 08.
Yeah, 07, 08 and kind of declined and came crisis. Back. Yeah. But if you think about that time, you would remember this time too, is that our two biggest clients were run by a big realty company in Chicago. Yeah. And they loved us because our slogan was green and clean. Keeping your yard green and clean is that we were going to, instead of doing volume, which was very popular at the time, we were going to focus on quality. So so they would pay us more. We would put in, remember we had like landscape programs we had like cut flower gardens at the nursing and assisted living homes. But your values, I guess, really came into play when everybody had that recession crunch. Yep. And that real estate company came to, I remember that meeting that they came to. They said, Scott, you've been doing each property for $80,000. I want you to now do it for 40.
Right.
And I was like, guys, I can't play that game because I can't deliver you the same service. And so they moved and they went with one of the big boys, right? A Brickman at the time, a Valley Crest, a Davy Tree, people that would be more volume, and they would buy in volume, so their material costs were smaller.
Yeah.
And I ended up losing those clients because I couldn't do it for half price. And so multiple things kind of at play. But, you know, as I kind of was going through my mind at that time, and when you're asking me why is the hesitation to come join Aspire Management, is because, one, I trying to figure out who I was outside of Scott the landscaper. I don't know if I was like a polished business guy, and to see myself like you and Andy at the time, right? And I was trying to work back from a like kind of a comeback in the recession a little bit, where I was like, man, I'm going to figure this thing out. Mm-hmm. And it just got really difficult, man. It was a difficult time.
But I guess what I'm interested in going is a little deeper with
Sure.
you. Why did you make? I mean, that all makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You still had to make a leap of faith. Why did you
yeah.
make the leap of faith and decide, I'm going to join Dad's business and work for Dad?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? I think it's like the little bit of like maybe that, for those of you that are that entrepreneur out there listening, like you just kind of have that gut feeling like, look, Dad's got a good thing going on. I really liked that you had like multiple clients. I was fascinated by other business owners. So you would have landscapers and
Yep.
transportation companies and home
Publishing
health cares
companies.
and all kinds of like, I was like, that's just super interesting work. And yeah, I think it was just, to your point, I think too, it's just time, right? It was time to maybe mature and evolve into the next business. And you're like, you know, a father, a friend, a partner. So I was like, if I'm going to roll the dice with anybody, I'm going to roll the dice with this guy. I'm going to roll the dice with Dad. So let's sell exit planning, or let's sell M&S Connection landscaping, and let's venture into a world that was honestly quite unknown for me. I always felt like you probably didn't even realize how like kind of overwhelming at the time it was for me, from wearing like boots and construction jeans to Ohio State ATI.
Wearing sport coats.
Well, at the time,
Dress shirts.
dude, we were wearing those ties. You
yeah,
had me
we
going
were.
from a polo shirt and jeans to a tie, and you guys were speaking like a whole language, and people with MBAs and law degrees, and I'm like,
right.
what is all this world?
Yeah.
It was a little intimidating for like a more of a blue collar guy, I would say, back then for me.
Yeah, do you remember, you always were a little bit more of a blue-collar guy. Do you remember on that drive back to John Carroll your sophomore year?
Yeah.
And Mom kept, you know, she was in the front seat, you were in the back, and she kept turning around looking at you like, and I'm like, what the heck is
Time
going on?
to talk to Dad already, man. Yeah.
And we were about halfway over to dropping you off at John Carroll to start your second year, and you finally said, I don't want to do this. You know.
Yeah, I mean that's another story that people probably don't know, right? Is that I went from like pretty into going to John Carroll, right?
Yeah,
doing like a
Grandpa
business.
went there,
Yeah.
two
Long
of my
Snider.
brothers went there, I went there.
Long family Snider history. Basically, you guys got me into John Carroll, because the other funny part of that is that I applied to a bunch of wild schools, but didn't have the test scores to get into any of them. So I think I was denied and then waitlisted at one, and you're like, okay, like you got to go to college, son. We'll get you to Carroll. And yeah, I just also probably just didn't want to disappoint, right? Where I was like, all right, Dad really wanted me to get a business degree, minor maybe, and I think I had a concentration in entrepreneurship, faith-based school, right? Jesuit kind of culture.
But you wanted to drive tractors.
Yeah, to saying like, hey, Dad, I don't know if I want to write business plans. I think I just want to learn how to dig that hole, and lay that patio, and I want to go to Ohio State's Agricultural Technical Institute, which is like a farm school.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that also really got you, though, too, is that they were at the time, for many consecutive years, were rated the #1 horticulture school in the nation. So at least
that's
you
the
kind of
place
like,
to go if you're going to be in that business.
if you're going to go, let's go to the best. And it happened to be in our backyard. I used to commute an hour down to school one way, 2 hours round trip, 3 days a week, living in your basement, still at home.
Given that you already had a business, I remember you getting an A in accounting. Remember?
That is like one of the only A's in college that I ever got. I can tell you, I know for a fact that it is the only class that I was ever asked to be a tutor.
Yeah.
So they're like, you want me to stick around after school and tutor people in
you
accounting?
knew it because you were running a business.
It was cool though, because what I liked about ATI is, since it was technical, it was geared towards the landscape business. It was like accounting for like landscape architects and business owners and designers. And so it was like you were learning accounting, but relating it to what a P&L would look like if you ran a landscaping outfit. So it was just like really, I would learn stuff that day and go apply it, the next day in business. So it was just really cool. That was a cool experience.
So you had a really early experience of that emotional tie to and passion to something you love, right? And you were able to overcome that. I really wanted you in Aspire because I don't know if you remember, but what I told you is don't fall in love with this business, fall in love with business.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. That was like an aha moment for me, too, when you did kind of say that to me, and maybe you saw kind of a little bit of the struggle. Remember, I was doing like professional soccer then, serving on a bunch, just trying to fill my time. It was, but I remember you saying that kind of was a light bulb click.
Yeah, and
for
I
me.
felt like coming into Aspire, you were going to be able to see all kinds of different types of businesses.
Which we did.
And at the time, we were loosely talking about being partners in a family enterprise. Nothing had formally happened, but it was certainly on my mind.
Yeah.
I could see you were, a born entrepreneur. I thought it'd be kind of cool to be in business with my son and build a legacy that way, And I was thinking, because remember, Aspire was originally, I created it to go out and buy my own businesses. Right? Buy, prove, grow, and sell my own businesses. It turned into a consulting company, actually. But I was also thinking, if you got exposure to some of these other businesses, maybe we'd find something we like.
Right.
So fast forward, and we're now 2012, right? You're getting your groove on and Aspire. You fit in really good, and you were playing the sales role for us, and we were starting to, get our mojo because things that I wasn't that comfortable with, you were really comfortable with, and vice versa. We started to get that groove going, and we end up buying EPI, right?
Yeah, right.
Just for the record, too, 2008, the year you joined Aspire, was the year I got my credential.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
And so I was kind of moving in that direction, and 4 years, flash forward 4 years, we end up buying EPI. And when we first bought it, we had some vision of the potential. In fact, Mom had told me last night, we were talking, she says, I remember you saying, like, this could be big, when you got your credential in 2008.
Yeah.
But I didn't really have a lot of time to work on it because
Right.
was thriving. I think at that point I was invested in 8 different businesses. So,
Yeah, we had a few. That's, absolutely.
I mean, I was like doing all kinds of different
Yeah.
ventures. And so EPI really, in those first few years, really struggled, if you remember. I think we lost money the first 3 years. Business was located in Chicago.
Yeah.
We really couldn't get our arms around it. I didn't have time. You were kind of balancing your time between EPI because you
Aspire.
represented the family, and you were still doing Aspire. A couple of years forward, after we bought EPI, the thing is struggling. We're not sure what to do with it. I asked you to take over.
Yeah.
Right? That was 2014.
It was July.
And we had just we had decided to move to Cleveland. We had hired a management company. We fired them. I said, I need you to do this.
Yeah.
They lasted about 6 months, right? Because
Yeah.
I just didn't have that entrepreneurial mindset that we were looking
No, they were like association management.
Yeah.
Man, you never viewed EPI as an association.
Right,
It was like a
exactly.
community,
Right.
not like a membership organization. So, they didn't work out. No, I remember
So you
that.
got pretty comfortable wearing the tie and the sport
did.
coat and the suit
Yeah,
and
I
all that
did.
kind of stuff. And I asked you to, and you hesitated when I asked you to take over EPI.
Yeah.
It was another moment, I think, for you where I asked you to do
Yeah,
something.
Like, oh, man, come on.
And you kind of went, you weren't comfortable, were you?
No, I think it was for similar reasons, right? Maybe it's a little confidence issue, but it was like, man, I mean, I like working in your business because you're working with owners, and I like doing the sales thing where I can integrate with advisors and then bring them to the table for guys like you to go work with.
Yeah.
But now you're saying, all right, can you step into an organization and lead a bunch of advisors and then do a bunch of education? And frankly, before that, before EPI, I wasn't a big like education guy. Like I was a decent student.
Yeah.
But I wasn't like really like waking up every morning, can't wait to go to school
You
and
weren't
learn.
an academic.
No, I wasn't an academic. And I think it was
You're a
really,
doer.
it wasn't necessarily because it was like a new venture that we were going on. It was like, man, like, so I'm confident in sales, relationship building, project management. But now you want me to like lead a bunch of advisors that are highly educated and talented and run an education company. Like, I don't know if I can even do that.
Well, an education company was losing money.
Yeah, and losing money. Yeah.
So
I'm like, dude, that's a big ask.
So we have a discussion. I remember the discussion too. It was in the hallway of my home at the front door. And I remember saying to you, I don't know if you remember this or not. I remember saying to you, I need you to do this.
Yeah.
I don't have time to do it. The family's invested money in this thing.
Right.
There's nobody else that I trust. I need you to do
Game
it.
time. Right.
And I want you to commit to do it for 2 years. And after 2 years, if you don't want to do it anymore, we'll come up with another solution.
Sure.
But I need you to commit to do this for 2 years.
Yeah.
And you said yes.
Yes, I did.
Why? Why didn't you just tell me to go pound salt? Like, look, I don't want to do
I don't
this,
know.
man. Like,
I think so. I think there's maybe another, maybe two reasons. One, just the general love and respect for you, right? I can't honestly say that I really knew what I was getting into, right? I knew of the business because you were an active member and it was a part of our like branding and marketing strategy.
Yeah.
So I integrated with the people a little bit.
Yeah.
And I thought, so there's one, it was an ask from Dad. So I was like, okay, like I got to respect that. But I also would say that getting to know you inside of your business and seeing what you had, there was a bit of me that was like, well, there's a recognizable opportunity here where truly, if for the audience that's listening, if you rewind back to that time 10 years ago, it was a very fragmented profession, right? And what you had created,
Really?
Still at the time in that, I guess we did Value Acceleration was just coming to market. You created an ecosystem where people could interact and join. So I'm like,
we had the chapters going.
yeah, you had chapters going. You had owners recognizing the methodology because it was easy for them to implement. You had advisors seeing themselves in the methodology. And I said, man, that's the flip the script model, truly, where I'm like, Dad, maybe I get in here and we run this thing. You stop working with owners and you start working with advisors, and your advisors are the client because you're coaching them in how to be a great advisor to business owners. And there's a little bit of me probably that saw that opportunity as well. And I was kind of itching because Aspire Management wasn't mine, right? That was yours.
Yeah.
And I was itching to get back into being a business owner, and that avenue, given it was a family investment, gave me an avenue to put my stamp on that business too and say, okay, yeah, this is the challenge I've been looking for. So the combination, you're kind of hitting me right where I could see the opportunity, a big ask from Dad, which I respect, and I can really get back into my entrepreneurial realm because I was your employee at Aspire Management, right? And that was different for me.
And the promise that I made to you is that we'd be partners.
Yes.
If we did
right.
EPI.
Is that we did it
and
we
held
would be
on to
partners.
it, we'd become partners.
Yeah.
And not an employee.
Right.
We'd be a partner.
Yeah.
Right. That was. And so you did it. It was a grind, though, if I remember, because, again, we were losing money. You remember that 2013 conference?
It was 2014.
Cleveland was great, but you remember that 14
14
conference? What a disaster.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What's funny for the audience is Dad had asked me to go do this thing, so I say, okay, cool, I'm in. Right? We moved the business to Cleveland from Chicago.
You never really ran a conference before.
And no, I certainly haven't done that, but I had inherited all the pre-planning function of the conference. And again, as Dad said, we were losing money, so I just came in and lost us more money. So my first year was kind of a loss. I'm like, Dad, okay, Are you sure you still want me running this thing? We lost like $44,000 or something that year on the conference because I mismanaged like our room block. And I mean, that was a very hard lesson to learn, but now I know all about managing conferences and room blocks. But that was tough. And then
what were some of the other lessons you learned? Because that was really your first step. I mean, you were still only 28 years old, and it was a big ask on my part. But what other lessons during those turbulent first years of owning EPI? What other lessons did you learn during that period?
Really taking me back. I would say one that pops right out of the gate is just general mentorship, right? So you're in a new place. You got to be like vulnerable. You got to be open to feedback. You got to listen. You got to be coached, right? So I'm venturing into a place that I have no idea on. Like, remember we ended up letting Dennis go, the guy that was running the business. But then I said, Dad, I think I need to hire him back because he knows a lot more about continuing education and that management.
We hired him as a consultant.
And being able to go back and say, hey, man, like, I know that this didn't work out this way, but you are really talented here. So I got, like, that kind of mentality. And I also started managing. Remember, during that time, too, we had to hire our first couple of employees. Yeah. And by hiring our first couple of employees, these weren't dudes, like, running weed whackers and driving plows, right? These were marketers and event managers. These were professionals. So there were some lessons learned around how do I start to manage those types of people and communicate my vision to those types of people, and how do you articulate your vision? Because Vision it was more of an owner-operator business in M&S. And even though it was kind of owner-operated, obviously when we started the EPI journey, delivering your vision to others around you was a little bit more something new for me, because I don't know if, the guy driving the plow really cared about where EPI or M&S wanted to go. So, yeah, I mean, all kinds of different – it was like and I would say, a lot of relationship building as well, so like building through partnerships, a lot of different sales techniques that kind of led to like a cool 3 or 4 year run where we finally kind of popped, right? We finally said, boom, EPI's here.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting run.
One more question around this time period.
Sure.
12 to 15,
right?
Right?
Yep, sure.
You had some personal challenges during that.
12 to 15, yeah. I was going through a
So
divorce.
all this, you just sold your business. You're
Yeah.
part of Dad. Dad's put this big ask on you. You step into that in an area that you really haven't been comfortable, and then you got some personal issues.
Yeah.
It had to be a lot to juggle for you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think it's like that old saying of like maybe that's why I'm comfortable being uncomfortable today, because that was a pretty uncomfortable time, right? So if you hear me talk about my family too, growing up, we were like very conservative Catholic family. I think on both the Kozlowski and the Snider side, I might have been like one of the first to get divorced, right? And all my uncles and aunts were pretty much all together, right? So it's like at 23 years old or something like that, right? I'm going through a divorce. I'm selling my company. I'm joining Aspire. Then I finally feel at home. Now I'm going to go run EPI. So think about those pops of pretty major changes in your life, both business and personal. I think one of the other life lessons is, right, you just got to keep kind of pivoting, and the perseverance and the grit kind of comes out, and just know yourself and keep moving. But it was tough. That was
Do you think
a tough
it toughened you up?
Yeah, I mean, for good or for bad, if I'm being totally honest with you, right? Like, it made me like, I think it did toughen me up generally, but I often think it like desensitized me. A lesson that I learned, I think, fast forward to 2020, right? Like a lesson that would come out later to say, oh, there's a lot more emotion. I would hide stuff or like hide my emotions and not talk about them even with you and just kind of make it through the 365 days in the year, right? And again, my life was pretty still damn good, right? I'm not complaining by any means, but it toughened me up both in positive and negative ways.
Okay, so 2 years after that big ask, I come back to you, 16.
Yep.
And I say, okay, son,
you
did your job.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? Do you want to stick with it, or do you want to move on to something else? I'll hold up my end of the bargain. And you said, I want to stick with it.
Yeah.
Why?
I think we finally, I felt it. You could, again, going back to that entrepreneurial feel that I think many of us have as business owners, that we finally caught our stride, like 2016.
Yes, that was the first year we made a profit.
We made money. I felt confident. Like I was like, I think I figured out this business.
I remember you changed the format of the summit too?
We did. We have that big loss, and then we reformatted the summit. That's a great point.
Where did we have it in 15? Do you remember?
15.
I remember 16 was
2015
was
Beach, 2015 was Huntington Beach.
Oh, that was okay.
Yeah. So we're 9 years. We'll be celebrating the 10-year anniversary next year of the new format that people see today of the Exit Planning Summit. Yeah. But it was after we lost money in Fort Worth that I said, look, we got to break down this model, redo it. We're too much like other conferences. That's not who we are. Yeah. So saying that, right, I feel like I kind of figured out who we wanted to be. We started making some money. We had all those cool chapters. There's a fun factor. Remember, I started traveling quite a bit too. So as a young guy, like traveling. Remember, now I'm well through my divorce, so now I'm traveling and meeting new people and other young professionals. It was the first time, like we always used to go on like really cool family vacations, but it was the first time that I got to see. I probably saw 20 different states.
Right.
That over that 1 year.
Yeah,
right.
You used to actually track it.
Yeah, man. So it was just a cool, fun, young time, right? So I was like, I don't think I want to go. And now I feel confident in running this business. Let's hunker down and make a run.
Yeah.
So
16, we'll go through one more period and we'll take a break.
Yeah, sure.
So 16, I think the next pivotal period for us was 16 through 19.
Yes.
We made our first profit in 16, and then EPI just
basically
took off
J-curve.
in 17 through 19. I think you traveled 200 plus days.
226, 220. I always remember
I was
it.
at like 192. We were traveling all over.
Booming.
What do you think was the secret sauce behind EPI's success during that 3-year run of 17 to 19?
So one was, I would say, customers, right? So we were focused on the right relationships. Many of us know who James Jack is in the UBS community. He was you always remember those things as any owners listening, right? You always remember those. That was a big milestone moment because UBS was the first to approve the SEPA designation.
Yeah, of the big firms.
And of the big financial institutions that you see today, right? Yeah. UBS was the first. And right after they approved it through, frankly, some of the SEPAs, some of those old school SEPAs that came to like the San Francisco program, and they came there. A couple of them are already retired now, believe that, right?
Yeah.
Where they rolled the dice because they were like Hal Dursema.
Yeah. Yeah.
They came there because they wanted to learn about being a better advisor to owners, knowing that they could never get reimbursed and they could never use a designation, but they were beating the drum inside of UBS, and they said, okay, let's be the first to market, let's approve it. What I always commend UBS in doing is right after they approved it, they hired somebody to lead it internally, which was James Jack. Right. And then he became a huge internal champion for us. He became a SEPA, his team became SEPAs, and off we're running. And once you have one of them, you got another one, and then you got another one. And so I just think, like, being persistent and intentional and deliberate with building the right relationships finally paid off.
Yeah.
I think was a kind of a big lesson learned that time in that period of time, and a big success. And I think that one of the things that I think stays true to EPI today that we saw start in 2015 and certainly walk through 16, 17, 18, 19 is like the spirit of entrepreneurship. Like, we weren't your typical professional association. No. We weren't your typical CE gatherer. Like, we existed to help professional advisors kind of growth and impact, right? Make a bigger impact with business owners and grow their practices and grow themselves.
Change the outcome.
And change the outcome. And so I think people were attracted to us during that time because we were different. So kind of sticking to those guns a little bit to say, like, this is who we want to be. Let's go out and do it. And so I think that was a solid run.
I remember Hal telling me that when they came out to San Francisco for the SEPA program, they came out there to learn a little bit about exit planning, but it was their intent to develop their own program.
Oh, yeah.
And Hal told me, he said, we came out, went through SEPA, and then we went back and we said, we don't need to develop this.
It's already
exists.
Here. Yeah.
Or we just need to partner up with these people.
Yeah.
But I do also think it was a key thing when they hired James. And I was also a little nervous, James, if you're listening, and I hope you're recovering well.
Yeah.
But I remember when James came out, he said, I'm going to evaluate, all of you, all of the companies in the exit planning space. And I thought,
certainly,
man, I hope we make the cut,
Yeah.
And we did. But, obviously that was a little bit of a stressful situation too. And I guess, the rest is. So going through that, I mean, we were so busy, and like, I remember coming back in 19 and saying, after the end of 19 and saying, I was 59 by that point.
Yeah, right.
And saying to you, like, I can't travel like that. I just can't.
That's tough.
How did you, final question we were taking, how did you balance personal and business during that period? Because the focus was pretty heavy on the business.
Focus was on, the focus was certainly on the business. So I love traveling. So there's a couple things. So one, I've always had my soccer thing, right? So like one of my outlets is staying true to, even now approaching 40 years old, staying healthy enough to not just play, but play super competitively with dudes that are half my age. Yeah. So that was always a key priority. Like, you have your running and your fitness. That's tough for me if I did not have that in my life. So I stayed true to that. I also, at that time, was still coaching soccer. So I always wanted some volunteer activity where I felt I was giving back to the community. So I was coaching soccer at that time. But I also like outlets. So what had happened over those 16, 17, 18, and 19 is that I've built friends around the country because I would travel to these cities, right? Some that were SEPAs, some that you would just meet hanging out at a coffee house or a bar, and you would go see these folks. And so I always tried to tack on another couple days to just decompress and hang out after a SEPA program. And if you remember, Dad, at that time, many of the people that worked at EPI were all my friends.
Yeah.
So it's like, cool, like Josh Koza is here with us managing a SEPA. You want to just hang out in Chicago for another couple days?
Yeah.
So we would decompress from the business.
Yeah.
But it was a key part because it helped us balance our friendship too, because Josh and I were friends, but I was also his boss at work. So we would host a SEPA program all week where I was boss. And then we'd be able to say, let's leave EPI away for 48 hours and go hang out in the city of Chicago or on the beaches of California or in the downtown of Atlanta, wherever we were at. Yeah. And so that was kind of the blend. But I didn't have family like you would have had family at similar ages, right? I didn't have kids. I didn't have I didn't have a wife. You know, I had a relationship, but I didn't have some of those key things that might pivot the way you think. So it was really more about feeding me.
30-32 at that time and single.
Yeah.
30-32 for me at that point. I had 2 kids.
Yeah, wildly different.
We were different.
Yeah.
We came up.
So it was really about making sure I was replenished so I could come back to the business and deliver.
Yeah.
So when I think about balancing that personal life, I needed those types of things to kind of like decompress and then come back. Because to your point, and anybody that's growing a business like that and traveling like that, I mean, it was exhausting. It took everything that you needed.
It does wear you out.
So we're at the big 2020, and we all kind of know what happened during that time in not only our lives in the Snider family and in EPI's life, but really across the world. So let's take a quick break, and we'll dive into like chapter 2, if you will, of section 2 of the EPI story. So give us a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hey there, business owners. Are you ready for a game-changing opportunity? Introducing the 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report. Over the past decade, this groundbreaking research has reshaped how we view business ownership and exit planning. This report isn't just another study, it's a deep dive into the evolution of business ownership. It shines a spotlight on the crucial intersection of business attractiveness and owner readiness, revealing the undeniable impact of preparation on achieving successful transitions. With younger generations taking the reins, exit planning is taking on a whole new perspective. Education and awareness about preparing for the future have never been more crucial, and with financial readiness leading the charge, there's a clear opportunity for growth and learning. But here's the kicker. The report shows a surge of exit planning education and understanding, yet many still lack formal transition teams, highlighting the essential role of comprehensive support. So who's got your back? Trusted advisors have evolved from CPAs to financial advisors, making a decade of significant change in support networks. Ready to take the next step towards a successful exit? Dive into the Exit Planning Institute's 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report and start shaping your legacy today. The future is knocking. Are you ready to answer? Discover your readiness level at 2023ownerreadiness.com and take the first step towards a successful and significant exit.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. So we're flipping the script with Dad today, taking me down this like entrepreneurial journey. It's actually been, we were laughing kind of at the break because you kind of internalize this stuff and you kind of operate on autopilot, always kind of having these lessons learned. But if you don't take the pause time to reflect, you almost kind of forget about them sometimes. So the first half, I mean, really taking me back to like 16 years old. So the second half would start at 2020, and many of the followers and listeners of the show and EPI are part of this journey. If you think about it, is that it really 2020? You know, if you're just kind of tuning in, we stopped with, you know, Dad and I traveled 200 plus days a year. We were having 9 SEPA programs with 90 people in it. We were having a great summit. We were teed up to go to the biggest summit ever that we were going to have, and we had it, remember, in La Jolla in California, up in 2020. Yeah. And our world changed. And so I'll toss it back over to you for that kind of second half of the EPI story, if you will, and my entrepreneurial journey, or whatever you called it as we start the show.
Yeah, and I think all businesses, you know, at some point in the business life cycle face this, right?
Yeah.
It's not smooth sailing all the time.
Right.
And, you know, a lot of people think it's like a pretty natural, regular trend line, but it's really almost like a storm. You know,
it's
like
you
have these
waves.
Giant
totally.
times of success, and then some tragedy, many outside of your control, kind of hits.
Yeah.
And that's what I think people need to understand. I think that's what gives business owners their resolve. For us, we were rolling, feeling good. Like all right, we finally got our arms around this thing. We've owned it now for 7 years.
Yeah.
We've got the machine rolling. We're in at UBS. Now we can start to try to leverage that relationship. And physically, I can tell you, for me, I was probably one of the best. I turned 60 that year.
Well, you had just ran the 8 Tough Miles in St. John, right? Yeah, in the U.S. Virgin Islands, yeah.
And I was feeling like, wow, I'm like strong, business is good, relationship is good, like,
Yeah, man.
And then we get back from St. John, and COVID hits.
Right. Yeah.
And the next thing we realize is, boy, we have millions of dollars of prepaid SEPA programs and have no way to deliver it, right?
Shocking.
And so we had to reinvent the business in pretty short order, and had to make, while that was going on, we had to make a pretty significant leadership change as well, right in the middle of all that.
All of that.
If you recall, our relationship was really struggling at that time as well. It was probably the low point in our relationship, maybe.
It's probably like the only time that I remember, in my whole, between then and birth, that my relationship was. So I would never describe our relationship as like bad.
No.
But I would describe it as bad in 2019, 2020. It was tough.
Yeah. It's just odd, I think, sometimes in the life cycle of being an owner. I think this is important for people to understand. Like, we've got all these great things going on the business side, and then, we talk about the 5 Ds and things like, distress. Boom, we get hit by it,
Well, we had, me and you also had disputes, disagreements.
We get hit by disagreement. I tell people all the time, I was hit by 3 out of the 5 Ds in like 2 years,
Yeah, maybe even shorter than that.
And you're just thinking like everything's rolling, we feel good, and then all of a sudden a punch in the gut.
Yeah, and a big one.
So, you really had to step up at that time. What was it? Can you describe what it was like during this period, and share with people some of the key moves that you made to keep the company and the team going during that time?
So we talk a lot about this on the show because I just think it's such a pivotal moment in EPI's history, and it's interesting to have Dad here from another perspective on like what was that like personally. So as I said, but I mean, there's like 3 things, maybe 4 things that come to mind. It was one, me and you just weren't jiving and it was weird because it was the first time in our lives we weren't jiving, and not jiving at all, right? Yeah. We weren't jiving at all. I didn't have like I had a girlfriend at the time that I had a pretty horrible relationship with, which was really tearing me down and tearing our company apart a little bit as well.
Yep.
And then you had COVID, right? So it's like, okay, the business that we just spent the first segment of the show talking about that we finally got now has completely changed. Yeah. And even though, certainly a younger guy, I was just I was totally against virtual education. And so, as Dan said, it was such a big shift that we quite literally, I always think about it, when you see like a Formula One team, they like literally take apart the car and put it back together in between sessions.
That's true, yeah.
Or like you go to a drag race, they like quite literally take this really good engine,
and reassemble
they just qualified well. They take the whole engine apart and put it all back together.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what we did on a much more even emotional level. And so when I think about that, all of that stuff going on, there was like a handful of things that I would say got us through that initial wave. Right? It was an investment in a team. Right? So we had to invest in people that we could trust, that were skilled, that were passionate and entrepreneurial, and knowing that when I formed that team, we spit out with a team that was fairly young and frankly not all that proven yet.
Not proven at all.
We also had to like invest in the development of that team.
Yeah.
And as I invested in that development of my team, I would say that the third thing that came to mind was it was like an investment in yourself. So that's when I met Fred Johnson.
Yeah.
And the Initiative One program. And what I realized is that not only maybe did the team need some support, I needed to figure out who I was. It was another weird time. It was like a time that you asked me about, selling EPI or selling M&S and losing identity. I was like, oh man, I thought I was so sure of who I was.
Right.
But I actually wasn't. So there was an investment in myself. I think there was investment back into our partnerships. And then there's investment back into the community and kind of working through all 4 of those major things. kind of allowed us to kind of pivot that time. But it was intense, man. That was an intense time, no doubt.
Yeah, I think there's a lesson. I don't know if you agree with me, but there's a lesson here is in that really trying time, probably the most trying time in our 21-year partnership.
Yeah.
We didn't turn and run.
No, we
actually
faced
did the opposite.
Yeah.
We actually doubled down and invested even more into the business,
Yeah,
right?
we did.
And invested even more into our relationship and more into our team than ever before. And I think, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but like as an owner, it's a risk, right? It's like, okay, do I double down here or do I pick up the cards and take off?
Right.
Because you think about the millions of dollars we had
At risk.
It's like, how am I going to pay that back? I got to refund all that money, or should I just shut the company down? And, just close it.
Yeah.
And we doubled down on everything,
Absolutely.
And then just as we sort of get our arms around that, right? 2020 we make it through 2020. It was tough.
Yeah.
I always tell people too that PPP money really helped. We remember we had just hired a whole bunch of people at the end of 19 because we expected we were going to grow.
Well, we used to hire
again.
too late. Remember that? Like, and maybe some of our listeners, when you're growing a business, you're like, well, I can't quite fund it yet. I know the growth is coming, so we're going to really pinch our team.
Right.
Everybody's going to be like super exhausted. Right. So we said, look, let's not do that to them anymore. Let's hire early. We have enough cash so that we could hire early and float a little bit because we know in 6 months it'll start to pick up.
Give them a chance to get oriented.
So you're absolutely right. We hired like 6 people in the fall of 2019, anticipating a big 2020.
Another 40%.
And then boom. Yeah, and then boom.
And then it went the other way.
So
we had all
went
these,
the other way.
and I remember talking to you from a business standpoint saying we have our payroll as a percent to revenue is too high.
Right.
Right? And, should we start cutting some people? And we decided, again, to double down,
that wasn't going to happen.
Right?
Right.
That's where I tell people all the time. Actually, in our case, PPP money actually helped because we invested all that money back into our team. Yeah. We didn't let anybody go.
No.
And I think people actually still got a raise that year. If
I think by the end of the year we did. I mean, me and you didn't take paychecks for a little bit there too, if you remember that. So the PPP, us not taking paychecks and kind of getting through that. Yeah. I mean, I think we ended up still staying true to giving people at least slight raises by the end of the year because it actually ended up being a good year for what had happened, right? We didn't necessarily do the typical growth that you see, but we didn't necessarily take a big hit as some other companies might have. So we were able to kind of stabilize.
Yeah, so as we get our arms around it, we're pretty confident we're going to be stable, and I always view okay, we survived 20.
Yeah.
We get into 21. 21's going to be our bounce back period.
Yeah.
And then I get cancer.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And I have to leave the business to recover and focus on my health and leave everything.
Yeah.
The COVID, the relationship changes, the young team, all of this stuff, all in your hands. And I actually, we have talked about this before. I felt guilty, right in the felt like I was deserting you in a time of great need.
Yeah, right.
But I had to. I had no choice.
Well,
it was my health.
Yeah,
I had to focus on my health. And you said, just go. I'll handle it.
Yeah.
The team will handle it. And obviously, you guys really stepped up. But can you describe a little more? Again, I'm trying to get to the personal. Personally, how was that a challenge? All this you had a lot on your plate at that time.
Yeah, I would say it's one of those things where you don't. There's two sides, right? You're dealing with all the business stuff, and then no one ever paused to ask, hey, how are you feeling about your dad getting cancer, dude? They're like, okay, Scott, what do we need to do to keep the business going while Dad is kind of stepping away? And no one, was really like, hey, how do you feel about everything else going on? So you have to deal kind of with both. So from a personal standpoint, I mean, it was like. You're just kind of taking a deep breath from pivoting a company. 2020 was an exhausting year, mentally, personally, and professionally, for a lot of people. And now you have this new business. So again, personally, Like I'm like, okay,
reinvented business,
I stabilized this business.
Yeah.
We basically did the same amount of revenue, so we had kind of a flat year. So I would consider that a success, all things given.
Yeah.
But we didn't grow the way we wanted to grow. In fact, we took a step back. So now we got to, and now I have something.
10% that
Yeah,
year.
maybe.
Remember,
Yeah.
there was a month where we had literally no revenue.
The month of March, we quite literally had zero revenue, but all the expenses because nothing. We
Right.
changed nothing.
Right.
So, you kind of just got through that year, and yeah, man, it's just it's a wild time. And maybe that's like I can write my book one day outside of maybe growing up through value acceleration would be like my year in 2020.
Yeah.
Because you think about this like kind of rebirth, right? So I have a new type of business. So the core principles are kind of all there, right? We still believe in value acceleration. We believe in multidisciplinary teams. But now we have a brand new set of core values, taking the old ones off the wall, putting new ones up.
You did. You and the team did that.
We have a brand new leadership team.
We did.
We have a new way of selling and a new strategy, right? Because we're different.
New way of distributing our product.
Right? So we have that. And we also, and then you have like the personal side.
Yeah.
I'm now again a single guy in the world, right? And so now I'm like, okay, maybe this thing's never going to work out for me personally because now I'm like, I'm in my mid 30s, and I'm like, okay, like 5 years away from being 40 here, maybe this thing isn't for me. And my dad has cancer, and so personally, it was just kind of chaotic, right? So. I think it's funny because I've been asked on the show many times about hiring friends. Thank God that I had a bunch of them around because I was able to lean into them as both my fellow colleagues that cared about our business and our family, but also my friends. So I was able to be around people that I loved like every single day. And I don't know how many people can say that walking into their businesses every single day. So it was a weird time as we
I was
moved
impressed by a couple things, and we're kind of relating this back to the methodology, right?
Yeah.
We talk about the 4 C's, the intangible capitals.
Sure.
The team that we have in place today was around then.
The executive leadership team was all there.
They were hadn't been really in leadership positions yet.
Yeah.
You were able to rally them,
Yeah.
and to all of you, Paige, Jocelyn, Chase, Jesse, Josh, you guys stepped up, and it just blew my mind, right? How they stepped up, supported you, backed you, and you guys you grinded through it. And I write about it in my new version of Walking to Destiny that I was so impressed that the most important quality I think of human capital is grit. Yeah. It's just pure toughness. Do you turn and run or do you stay and fight? And we stood and fought, and everybody stepped up, and that was so impressive, impressionable on me at the time because there wasn't really anything I could do to really help.
Yeah, well, you had to totally kind of let go, right?
So it was, personally for me, it was really a little bit scary,
It's the majority owner. You're just rolling
actually,
the
I
dice.
was talking to Scott Lang's wife last night at our company dinner that we have.
Yeah.
And I said it was like we were talking about this, and I said it's kind of like when you raise children, you think you're doing the right things, you're trying to do all the right things, but you really don't know if you've done the right things.
Yeah.
Right? Until they're tested. And that's kind of how I felt like our company, we thought we were doing all the right things, but you don't know until they're tested. And for me, when we went through that period, it was like, okay, my team just got tested, and they not only survived, they thrived,
Yeah.
So I was super impressed with you guys. I was also super impressed with Fred.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I can remember you coming to me saying, I want to invest quite literally several $100,000.
$160,000 during COVID.
Yeah, well, that was just the first.
Well, that was round one, yeah.
And I wasn't like, what?
Yeah.
And you, I think that first time I said no.
Yeah, you wanted to see return on investment,
and
right?
Then
The numbers.
You came back second time, and I think this was after you had a year.
Yeah.
And I was now a lot more comfortable with, and I said, okay, let's do it. And I remember calling Fred and saying to Fred, I got a really young team in there, and I'm not there. I got to rely on these people. Do you think I should hire some experienced people that can mentor them, or should I just stay with these young people? Yeah. And I remember him saying, you got a super talented team, and I understand why you might want to bring in more experience, but you have a really young team. They're going to make a lot of mistakes, but they're really smart, fast learners.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'm going to make that leap of faith. I think as an owner, you got to make those leaps of faith,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember coming up to him like 2 years later seeing him at the summit. And I went up to him. I'm like, you son of a bitch.
You were right.
You were right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you led that team, and you guys did a great job. And after we got through all of that, for me, it was kind of like, let's go to current times now, right?
Yeah, right.
For me, it was like, I can kind of let go, let my team go, and maybe I can start shifting my attention to my own exit.
Yeah.
Because now in 2024, I'm going to be 65 this year, right?
Yeah.
So, maybe I should start in 2022 after I got through the cancer and I was in my recovery. I'm like, I need to shift my focus here. I need to start being more serious about my own exit. And I felt more confident that I could do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that kind of brings us up to today, where we are today. And there's a couple things that made me comfortable with focusing on my transition. In particular, the strength of our social capital.
Yeah, our culture.
Right? Our culture.
Yeah.
So we invested in human capital. The other thing during that period is the investment we made in customer capital. Our customers and our members really supported us during that period too. They didn't abandon us. They actually did the opposite.
They leaned hard into the community.
They leaned hard into, look, you're a good group, good people. We want to work. We'll work with you. And all that helped us kind of get through that period. What are some of the things, and I think most people would agree we have a great culture, right?
I would think so.
What are some of the things that you've done over the last 4 years to build this social capital that I personally am so proud of that we have?
I would say after laying the foundation, and the foundation for me was getting a good executive leadership team and kind of spending those 2 years training them. After we put in some core values that we were all believed in, and the key thing for our listeners is I didn't build the core values, we built the core values. So it was really team and employee driven. And then we went through training that allowed us to do what we call trust accelerators, which accelerate communication and trust between people. And my simple answer, Dad, is I kind of did it and got out of the way. Is that I really do think the culture that's driven or is that is built at EPI is really kind of driven from the ground up. It's not from the top down. Is that I would think if you interviewed the 40 employees that we have here today, they all have a say in what kind of workplace and what kind of culture they want to be in and the people that they want to be in. And I could tell you, it's another one of those get comfortable being uncomfortable, because I would also willingly say to everybody here that it's not necessarily exactly what I would do or exactly what I was looking for, but it is something that collectively we like, that we like together. And just like any family, nothing's perfect, right? You got to take the good and the bad, some things that you really love with some of the stuff that kind of annoy you. But I think the biggest thing was once you set the foundation as the leader of the group, letting everybody start to contribute was kind of a key factor, and just kind of getting out of the way and letting it build itself.
Yep.
Would be key, I think, to culture.
Yep. I think we've seen too, even in success in building our bigger relationships, it starts in the field.
It does.
You know what I mean?
It's like no different than...
You don't start at corporate and work down. No. You start in the field.
It was like no different than 2017 and Hal Dursema, like having him come to the SEPA program and empowering him to take that message back and giving him the support to get out there and
what
preach
I'm trying
it.
to do here is for people that are listening, advisors and owners, is give them some of these things that have worked for us.
Yes.
And I think it's not like anybody can do it. It's more of a mindset, don't you think? It is a mindset. It's no different than you decentralizing yourself, right? It's not easy. No. So you have to be willing to accept change. And change, I think, in life isn't easy. So I think it's very... change, and there's a leap of faith you have.
A leap of faith.
Like you have to just like... like this latest venture that you got us into.
Yeah, this drivevalue.com.
It's like,
yeah.
that was a leap of faith.
It is. Yeah.
So I think for both business owners, I think that's, you got to get out of the way.
You do.
And like Fred said to me too, is they're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to live with that. But in the overall, it's better. And I think, do you think owners have trouble doing that?
Yeah, I think I had trouble doing it, right? I think you have trouble doing it. I think we have trouble doing it today, right? So yeah, because it's like, I mean, just kind of being blunt to our audience, right? It's like, if we fail, we're kind of screwed because this is 80% of our wealth. Whereas if the employee fails, they can just go get another job, right? So there's a little bit of that. And so I just think the owners just try to stay attached because they're like, man, this is like what I've worked for it's like, it's my destiny.
Yeah.
And so, hell yeah, I think owners, we could talk about it all day on shows like this, but like going and doing it is a whole wild, different story. And you have to be patient. You have to be able to take deep breaths along the way.
It's counterintuitive to what you're feeling.
Well,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
You're feeling like you need to step in, and I need to be in control. I need to start pulling the levers. And really, it's the
100%.
Opposite of what has to happen. I remember saying at one of our quarterly reviews to our team, build the company you want to build.
Exactly right.
Our job is to enable you to be successful, because if you're successful, we're going to be successful.
Which is a little like counterintuitive of what you were just saying, right? It's like, well, should the owner be building the company they want because it's their company? They funded this thing over a 10-year journey. It's the other way around.
Right.
It's like a new way, and talk about drive value. We're trying to teach business owners a new way of thinking about doing business because it's not like it used to be. Like you started this whole show an hour ago by saying business is personal. 1985, when you were at Sherwin-Williams, they weren't saying business is personal. They probably said, Chris, check the personal stuff at the door, man, and we're here to do business today.
Yeah.
It's just totally different. So, yes, I think it absolutely plays into owner mindset today, and I think it's a lot more difficult, and it's a lot more harder to do than said.
Okay, can I ask two more final questions?
Two more final questions, sure. Let's make it happen.
One is 2024, good year.
Solid year.
Solid start to the year.
Yes.
You got married this year.
I got married. Yep, a whole new evolution.
Another new thing that's been introduced to your life is you're a father for the first time.
I am.
How has that changed you?
I could tell you. You're much more in tune. It's not necessarily all about you. It's weird how things kind of come into your life. Like I was ready for it. I don't know if I would have been I think I'm a good dad. I don't think I would have been as good as a dad 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah,
but you just plan differently. You certainly lean hard into the blend and balance of business, personal, and financial, the stuff that we teach. And again, honestly, it's hard to answer because I don't know if I'd be thinking differently when it was just like me and you trying to run a business. I think it's very hard to balance because the business does need you. I'm maybe lucky enough or deliberate enough now to build a business that tries to be decentralized every day, so that whether me or any of our teammates here have that balance. But we just did this today. I looked at my calendar as I sat down to start my week, and I said, look, I have a business-oriented dinner Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights. That's just not going to work for me anymore because not only do I need to, but I actually want to. So you asked, to kind of round that out, you asked me the question, like, what kind of feeds you? I said, back then it was being able to be tied to the community and be able to be a soccer player. And it is those, but it's also being a dad today. And if I don't get home and hang out with my kids 4 nights in a row, my bucket's not full, so I'm not as good as a leader here. So you just have different priorities. It changes. I mean, you know how it goes, right? But you have to make a deliberate effort. And I do believe that you're one person, right? You don't separate the two. So it's like sometimes I got to be a businessman, sometimes I got to be a dad. And so you got to have that harmony throughout the week. So much more intentional living, that is for sure, to make sure that you're being a good dad. But nonetheless, it certainly has changed my life for the better. That is for sure.
It's benefited Mom and I, too.
Yeah, and I think everybody around me has benefited as well.
Last one.
Sure.
So, I'm facing my inevitable transition. We're in we've been in a transition for a long time. I think, we've accelerated that process in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Because of my health issues and just being more comfortable with the team that's been built. I've been decentralized. I get that to go to the summit. Everybody, hey, you're decentralized.
It's the key term these days.
That's the key term. We joke about it and stuff. coming from the son in the father-son equation and the minority partner in the minority-majority partner situation, I don't think people realize, they see our relationship as father-son, but they don't realize we've been partners for 21 years too, right?
Right.
What advice would you give to me and to other fathers and mothers who are in business with their children, right? I'm really interested, not from my person, but from the son or the daughter's perspective, back to mom or dad.
Yeah.
Worked with a lot of family. I always like to get the different perspectives. What advice would you give to a mom or dad or to me as I look at my own transition going?
So I would say to mom or dad, to any mom and dads looking to transition their business to the next gen, I think one of the things that maybe I wouldn't give it directly to you because I think we've done it together, but maybe two things that we've done right. And one, you've taught me not about just about the craft of our business, but you taught me about business. So like the craft of our business is creating great events, experiences, and educational opportunities through the value acceleration methodology. So I could teach you value acceleration all day. That's our craft. Just like somebody that's making plane parts, that's their craft. Yeah. Somebody that's a plumber, that's their craft. I think a lot of family businesses teach the craft, but they don't teach the business. So when son or daughter goes, cool, I'm the president of the company now. Wait a second, I only know how to make the plane parts. Yeah. How do I deal with social capital, customer capital, structural capital? Right. How do I run a business? Right. You've done a really nice job of teaching me both over those years. Yeah. And so for the listeners that are maybe transitioning to that next gen, don't forget that you can't just place your son or daughter into the vice president role and assume they know about what it takes to run a business if you haven't taught them anything. I think that's one thing. And I would say invest into the relationship. And so like we do the Tom Dean's, the 12 family business questions, right? The family business blueprint. There are tools and resources that help us to better communicate. There are tools and resources that help us evaluate. And so I don't know if any great relationship you have, you need to be intentional and deliberate in practice. And I don't know if first gen and second gen or second gen and third gen do enough practice and just kind of hope because they're father and son that their relationship is just going to be good. In fact, it probably needs more investment because you're more tied to each other. So I think that we've done those things like very well in our 20 years of doing business together. And those would be my advice back to any mom and dad looking to work with their son or daughter is you have to do those things really well and has to be planned.
We've talked about this too in the past. We have a partnership, right?
We
versus a father, the boss, son, the next generation to inherit the business. Yeah. Our relationship's a little different. Do you think that's an advantage? Do you think other fathers should be treating their sons and daughters as partners versus?
Well, if you want them to be an owner one day, you got to start treating them like one, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like they're again not just kind of walk into the business one day and be an owner. One, I don't know if every next gen is qualified to be an owner, so that's maybe a separate conversation to have. Mm-hmm. But if you start treating them like one, or maybe they are one earlier on in the equation, I do think that we look at each other as father and son, but we also have this respect of 51%, 49%. Like you technically make the final call and can call that in. But we also have to sit down at a table and make joint business decisions because it's mine and yours. It's not something that you're creating and giving to me. Right. And so, I think it's an interesting perspective. Again, people ask us quite a bit, like, wow, you seem to get along with your dad really well, and you have a really cool family business relationship. And that is another contributor. That I don't know if you just look at me as like, hey, Junior's getting my business one day. You look at me and go, that's my business partner, so I kind of got to talk to him about that. Oh, and he happens to be my son. Yeah. And so you do treat me. There are some son and father dynamics. Yeah. But I do think you treat me like as an equal, not just as the guy that will eventually get the business.
And you would recommend that all parents really try to look at that.
I would try. Again, a lot easier. I think it's a lot more difficult to do. But yes, I think it's a key element of family business success is that.
Why don't you think more owners do that? What holds them back from doing that?
Probably many things, right? Maybe they don't have the relationship that me and you have from the foundation, right? So they don't really communicate. They haven't really asked if the next gen is into being an owner in the next gen, and they're maybe physically not, like quite literally not owners, right? They're getting gifted a business and when you turn 70 and dad goes away, you're like, well, you'll start gifting some shares to me. There's no, I think they're not practicing like that, and maybe because they're not told to do that early on, right? I think one of the cool things about EPI is we're changing the way we do business, and that would be one of the changes that I would recommend in businesses of the future, that next-gen companies are treating their sons and daughters as if they are owners, or maybe gifting that, if they are gifting or buying ownership, they do it way earlier on in the career, not 20 years into it. Right?
Exactly.
Like do it when they're 25 years old and treat them like an owner for 20 years so that when they're 45, they know what it's like to be an owner, or they don't, because they're like, well, don't want this. I'd like to be bought out.
Yeah, and I guess my message too to mom and dads that are like in my position, there's ways that you can transition ownership and still maintain control.
Absolutely. Right. Well, that's probably why they're not doing it too, right?
Which is rare, but you don't have to have all. You could, there's some pretty significant advantages from a tax standpoint.
Sure.
The earlier you do it, the better. So if you're, as mom or dad, if you're not sure of that, or you don't have a good advisor, give us a call, because
we can walk through that with you.
There's some really creative stuff you could do, but you got to do it early. Let's flip that and say, okay, what advice would you give to sons and daughters who are in businesses with their mom and dad?
I would say have a deeper appreciation and a patience, and know that it's really difficult what they've done, right? Because I would say most people haven't done what we've done, where we've taken a business together and grown it. Mm-hmm. Most of my friends that own or are part of family businesses have watched the first gen or even the second gen take it all the way from a shed to a $100,000 manufacturing facility. And as the son and daughter, you're kind of getting pissed off a little bit because they don't recognize you as an owner, or they're not giving you the executive respect.
Yeah.
And one of the best lessons you've taught me is do the job before you get the job. So show your proof. Know that you got to show it a little bit, and that they're going to be a little bit harder on you than your regular boss because it's your mom or your dad. Yeah. So just accept it, be patient with it, and work hard. Yeah. And I think if you show them the grit, the strategic framework, the leadership team, and maybe you work for a smaller paycheck for a while, that you'll likely get what you deserve. Yeah. But I think patience and respect and an appreciation for what mom and dad and maybe grandma and grandpa built many years before you.
Yeah. And I can honestly say, another, advice I'd give to owners is I've learned a lot from you. It's not just me teaching you. Yeah. I've also learned a lot from you.
Yeah.
And so I think the advice I'd give to mom and dad is like, hey, reach out
to
your children and, give them the space to be creative, to shine.
That's fair.
And, open up your ears and ask them for their advice, because they probably have some things they can contribute.
Yeah.
And it's going to make them feel like they're, part of the business. And they truly do. Like I say, I truly do. I truly have learned a lot from you over the last 21 years.
And that's what a business partnership is about, right? Is that there's a mutual respect that we can learn from both.
Yeah.
And so, well, what a great show!
Thanks for going on this journey with me.
Yeah, man, it was pretty great. It was pretty amazing, actually. Although that first half really took me down memory lane for sure. All right, folks. Well, we're coming to an end, so please subscribe, listen, and leave a review on all of your podcast platforms. Dad, thanks for hanging out on the Exit Is Now podcast again. We'll see you guys all soon. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.